Previously, on the Retronomicon, it started with him and that ridiculous shirt of his. From there, I just needed him to play the right games. The rest was all his anger, his weakness. It allowed me to take over. And whenever I would lose my grip, that stupid douche would awake as if nothing had happened.
No more bleeding anymore.
What the fuck? What have you done this time, you fucking asshole?
Who are you calling an asshole, douchebag?
What fresh bullshit is this?
The freshest. As it happens, we're inside your mind. I'm afraid your body is beyond your reach. Now I'm in complete control.
No, I'm just gonna wake up, like I always do.
It's no use, douche.
Okay, what the fuck? My memories?
Yes. Sleep.
How are you doing this? Why are you doing this? What are you doing with my body? Hello everybody and welcome back to, well, my mind. Not sure why it's a giant black empty void of nothing. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the episode that's a complete wash. I've no good ideas left. No more shitty games I can think of to review.
Are you sure you don't want to think about me inside your butthole?
Christ no. Fuck off!
It's your mind, douche. You can think and review whatever you want in here. I don't give a fuck.
Right. It's my mind. I can think of a game I like. I can review a game I like. Wow, maybe there really is a silver lining to this whole possession thing. What game to review? Something that takes me back.
JumpingFlash. That takes 90s kids like me back to a simpler time. The PlayStation was the hot new console, hotter than hot cakes and hot dogs and a hot plate and a hot tin roof and a hot rocket to the centre of the sun. The sun is hot.
Nothing could be better than this. Nothing. That's it. Gaming has peaked. Look at those graphics. Look at those tits. They could not be any rounder. But wait, this game came out before that evil bitch ever scourged this planet, so what's the deal?
JumpingFlash! I shout it because there's an exclamation mark, look. Right there. Is a game that came out less than a year into the console's life and quietly made its influence in the early days of 3D platformers. It was one of the first 3D games I ever played. In fact, it might even be the first. Maybe. Just looking at this game case brings it all back. The polygonal graphics, the bright colours. But this game is also a first-person shooter. That's right, this video is essentially my favourite FPS games Part 2. So you better strap yourself in for this shit. The game is developed by Exact and Ultra, two Japanese game developers, the latter of which was a subsidiary of Konami and a contributing force to things like Metal Gear. So there's good history here. The game's story is basic, but nonetheless charming. An evil, greedy astrophysicist nutjob named Baron ALOHA, yes, Baron ALOHA is his name, and is that my shirt? Decides this one particular planet has a lot of cool shit that he could do with. So what does any insane scientist with incredible fashion sense do to make his dreams come true? Simple. He builds a load of weird looking squiddy machines to literally pick up entire chunks of planet with particular landmarks and haul them into space to turn into private resorts. With them he takes the 12 jet pods that power the planet, so quite evilly he not only takes all the planet's cool stuff, he also takes their means of existence. Talk about a step too far, Jesus Christ. More interestingly, the game refers to him as an
evil scientist who frightens children and is bent on slavery.
Frightens children? Is he on some kind of list? Anyway, as wacky as this plot is, I still think it has a certain simplistic charm to it. You play as Robert, which sounds like the noise a frog makes, but no, you're actually a robotic rabbit that shoots lasers out of its face. And he's some kind of agent or drone, I suppose, for an interplanetary policing agency called, Universal City Hall.
All you people up there in City Hall.
And you're sent to use your shooting and jumping skills to recover the jet pods, defeat bad babysitter Baron, and restore peace to Crater Planet. Wait.
The planet was called Crater Planet before it got fucked into Swiss cheese. Well, they fucked themselves with that name, didn't they?
The game plays entirely in first person, which at the time was also extremely refreshing, especially for someone like me who never really got a chance at that vulnerable age to play Doom, for example. A first-person shooter with fully realised 3D graphics was incredible to me. You have a charming little heads-up display which attempts to mimic the view through a helmet or visor, which includes your health, radar, special weapons, and aiming reticle. Shooting stuff and defeating enemies by blowing them up with your lasers was great. Special weapons resembling fireworks that enemies would drop were also really fun to use, and each had a particular strength in different situations. For example, the cherry bomb fires straight forward and creates a large blast radius for taking out multiple enemies quickly and doing a large amount of damage to bosses. There weren't many of these weapons, but these were really fun to use, and many of them were good at crowd controlling grounded enemies, such as the twisters and the homing rockets that assault nearby enemies that might be shooting at you from a place you can't immediately see. Then there was the Roman candle, which shoots like a giant laser. It's fucking awesome. But those aren't all the special weapons that you can find. The main feature that made this game stand out against other ambitious 3D shooters at the time, such as Doom, was that jumping was possible, and as well as being probably the most powerful weapon in your arsenal. The entire game is geared around jumping mechanics and how you approach exploration and combat as a result. It makes sense though. I mean, it's in the fucking name. Now, this mechanical mammal can jump stupendously high, and that's what was so mind-blowing about this game. Each level was a little sandbox that you could jump around in. You had a double and triple jump, so you could traverse huge distances, sometimes bypassing other more intended routes, or reaching well-placed secrets, which is so damn satisfying. Like here, stage 1, straight away the bonus stage is on this platform, and is only reachable by fully understanding the jump timings and mastering the game's physics. Jumping on enemies in a true standard set by games like Mario deals damage to them. More damage, in fact, than your standard laser shot. So you end up pogoing on things repeatedly and rapid firing for max damage, which is somehow even more satisfying. Although some enemies, again, in true Mario style, couldn't be jumped on without causing damage to yourself, creating a brilliant, well thought out mix of enemies in creatively executed levels. Level design was fantastic, and each world, consisting of 3 levels, 2 main stages and a boss stage, were themed around different environments. While many obstacles were things like floating platforms that weren't specific to level's theme per se, other obstacles were often things like temple ruins in the desert stage, windmills and cute little houses in the village looking world, or this colourful roller coaster type conveyor thingy that's on the theme park level that I still find amusing as an adult.
Too much.
Bosses would also be on point with the theme. All of these bosses are pretty well thought out, exciting to fight, satisfying to beat, and genuinely acted as their own reward at the end of worlds. I can't tell you how awesome it was to fight Dark Robert in this stadium for the first time as a kid. I thought this was the most epic thing I'd ever seen. The sound design was also nothing short of immaculate. The music for each level was catchy, well composed, and honestly, hearing it now, pretty damn complex for the original PlayStation hardware. Level music would often be composed to reflect the theme, and while some of these tunes do get a bit grating and annoying when you're running around like a headless chicken, I mean rabbit, trying to find that one jet pod that you missed, this was very rarely a problem, and if anything just made the victory music at the end of the stage that much more of a cadence of pure relief and joy. Ah, whew. Sound effects, in my opinion, are some of the best that the PlayStation had to offer at any point in the console's lifespan, only matched by games like Crash Bandicoot in my mind for their memorability. Lasers went, collecting items went, and defeating enemies went, and defeating bosses went. Oh man, what a lovely little game this is. While the game didn't have much going for it in terms of other modes, the game did also have a scoring system if you want a more arcadey experience, with enemies dropping currency that bags you points on a counter. This point counter doesn't play into the main game whatsoever, but you can set level high scores which you could show off to your friends, I guess. Because this game doesn't have multiplayer, this would probably be one of the only ways in which you could get your buddies involved. That, and the time attack mode, which as the name suggests, sees you complete levels and bosses as quickly as you can for a timed high score. While the main game was pretty fucking short and perhaps too much of a breeze in parts, there is a New Game Plus and a hard mode after that, which repeats the game at a higher difficulty, with more frequent and tougher enemies that appear in the stages with a different layout to the items, as well as making the bosses a lot more tougher. This definitely gives the game the boost in replayability that it needed had it just been the one adventure. Even so, playing the game 3 times through, twice at a more challenging difficulty, won't take more than a few hours of continued playing. It's a shame, but I still think this game deserves a place in my fondest of memories.
So that's JumpingFlash on the PlayStation 1. You can actually find it on the PlayStation Classic, and was quite honestly one of the big highlights for me personally.
Everything else kinda sucked. I mean, what a fucking embarrassment. No Crash, no Spyro, get out!
Thanks for the tip, douche.
Well, that was a fun bit of reminiscing. For a second there though, I thought it was going to be one of those not as good as I remember type games, but yeah, other than the graphics, game holds up well. So I'm going to give it a retrograde of B- for banging, but lacking in balls. I don't know if it's the excitement of that review or all this nostalgia, but is it getting hot in here? Anyway, what I love about the game is that it stands out as a puzzle platformer within the FPS genre. In fact, you know, it reminds me of another game.
Holy shit, Metroid Prime! Yes! I think you can see where I'm going with this.
This is this, but several years later.
It only recently occurred to me how games like JumpingFlash paved the way for a different kind of first-person shooter, the explorative first-person shooter. Yet Metroid Prime doesn't stick out in my memory as an FPS. I mean, it is, but it transcends the genre, fusing the immersive action of the first-person perspective with the exploration that made Metroid one of the most beloved series in gaming history. I never thought Metroid Prime would be the first Metroid game I reviewed on the channel, not when there are years of classics behind it that are certainly more retro, but I'm going to make a case that Metroid Prime is not only the most immersive first-person shooter game ever conceived, but also the most successful 3D adaptation of a 2D franchise.
Step aside, chubby plumber man. This is a job for Thomas.
Right, let's get some background out of the way quickly. For anyone unfamiliar, which can't be many of you, I mean unless you've been living on another planet like this fucker, you should probably at least heard of the series. The Metroid games are science fiction, action, exploration, adventure games that revolve around the adventures of bounty hunter Samus Aran and her battle against alien races that threaten the galaxy she exists in. Now, you want to talk about female representation in gaming that's more than just torpedo tits and hot pants? Look no fucking further. Samus was, like many classic Nintendo characters, designed by Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto, who was inspired to create the series following the success of Ridley Scott's film Alien and Sigourney Weaver's portrayal of the character Ripley. Samus, considering she's clad with armor and has no definitive features, whilst also existing at the time in a genre of nothing but male-dominated action heroes, was thought to be a man. Famously, though, the first game kept Samus' gender secret until the very end, revealing her to be female if you beat the game 100% with all collectibles. No big deal to us now, but back then, she was one of the first ever strong female characters in gaming. It was an important moment and will forever be remembered in the tapestry of gaming history. Moreover, Samus is fucking cool, man. Or should I say, whoa, man. She has a frickin' blaster on her arm, some sick-ass orange suit, and while her not having balls might be a problem for some bigots out there, she makes up for it by being able to literally transform into one.
Oh, look at that. Lovely little ball scratch. Ooh.
And on the odd occasion that her suit does come off, she's revealed to be a bodacious blonde with the body of an Olympic athlete and some big old bazungas to boot.
Now, you could consider this a sexist sexualization, but there's no denying the developer's intent to have a strong female character with strong feminine traits, without relying on them as a shameless selling point. Lara Croft.
The franchise's namesake, however, is of the primary antagonistic force that threatens Samus's adventures throughout the series. The Metroids, weird jellyfish-looking aliens that are, for the most part, a soulless plague of creatures that suck you off. And not in a fun way. Okay, I think that's enough background on the series to get into Metroid Prime, although I'm not going to talk about the plot itself in this game, as, well, to be honest, the chronology of this franchise is kind of all over the place, similarly to how Zelda is a wibbly-wobbly mess of timelines and significant events. If you've never played a Metroid game, you totally should, and you can explore that rich lore for yourself.
So, right, I fucking love this game, okay? I just do. It takes everything unique and fun about the 2D originals in the franchise and turns them into a sprawling 3D environment.
It adapts to the 3D world by introducing two simple concepts: lock-on and manual aiming. In previous games, Samus could only shoot up, down, and in some cases diagonally. For a game with a first-person view in a fully realised 3D space, that simply won't do. Naturally, the developers introduced a manual aim mode, allowing the player to be precise with shots by holding down the R trigger. But with the nature of the game revolving around repelling enemy attacks quickly and from any angle, more was needed. So the developers cleverly implemented a lock-on feature when the player presses and holds the L button. Repeated presses can switch your lock-on from one enemy to another, and while not a perfect system, as you can sometimes find yourself struggling to lock on to the intended target, this is only a minor problem for the most part, and if anything, teaches the player to be careful not to get surrounded and to approach large groups of enemies with more strategy. The other really cool thing that stands out as drastically different from the 2D games is the scan visor. Not only does this tool allow you to find out enemy weaknesses, behaviours, and dirty little kinks on the fly, but also opens up a whole database of log entries to collect, which furthers the exploration and adventure aspects of the game, making achieving 100% completion all the more challenging and fun. And long-winded, I suppose. You could think of it that way. My only qualm with this is that some bosses and enemies can only be encountered once, meaning that if you forget to scan them and add them to your log, you could potentially lose out on 100% completion by a hair, which does seem a tad unfair.
But don't despair. You might not care.
While the first game rewarded 100% completion with softcore pixelated porn, Prime rewards you with a cinematic and not much else. Don't get me wrong, this extra bit of ending is awesome, especially if you're planning to play through the whole Prime trilogy, but you could just as well look this up on YouTube or whatever, so you know, it's up to you. The alien worlds of the planets you visit are teeming with life, giant monstrous aliens, as well as some incredibly detailed plant life and vegetation. Every room of every area of every planet is a place full of intrigue and secrets. There really aren't that many rooms without something to discover. There are puzzles everywhere, some as simple as blasting away a cracked wall in true Zelda fashion, and others a complicated challenge that requires the use of Samus's many abilities. Just like previous installments, as you progress through the game, you find upgrades to your weapons, armour and abilities, and it's just as damn satisfying as it ever was. Abilities can include movement options like Peter Parkering the walls with the spider ball upgrade, weapon upgrades that can clear harder materials that block your path or open particular doors. You can upgrade the suit that not only makes you look even more badass with aesthetical changes, but also gives you access to areas of extreme conditions that you couldn't survive before, and different kind of beams to fire, which basically do everything I just mentioned. The ice beam, for example, allows you to open certain doors, complete certain puzzles, but also freeze enemies, giving you the upper hand in combat, as well as using them as platforms to solve puzzles. These upgrades and how they are geared towards game progression is exactly what Metroid games are all about. I mentioned before, I think it was the Grinch video last Christmas, there'll be a card in the top there you can click if you haven't seen it. I mentioned Super Metroid as the perfect example of backtracking being one of the more fun elements about the game, and this is where these upgrades come in. You may look at your map, remember there was a door or area you couldn't pass through before because you lacked the ability to. So, you set out to return to said door or area, but along the way you now notice that the connecting rooms have secrets and puzzles that you can also now find and solve because you have the equipment necessary. So you grab them, and each one makes you significantly more powerful, giving such an immense satisfaction to the player progression. Did I mention I fucking love this game? If you want to see examples of ability upgrades done wrong, take a look at that Grinch video again. Those developers were basically trying to do the same thing, except it was the equivalent of getting a big old green furry shit in your face. Movement in the game is fluid, and like JumpingFlash, the explorative nature of jumping around and scaling environments feels incredibly fun and liberating. Nothing quite made me feel as good in this game as when you first get your jump upgrade, the double jump, which gives you access to areas you couldn't before, as well as increasing your movement options. Oh, I should have mentioned, in neither of these games do you take fall damage either, so the freedom of being able to jump from ridiculous heights without repercussions gives you a real sense of power and control that I really appreciate.
Now don't let everything I've said so far diminish this very simple notion. This game's fucking tough, particularly on the harder difficulty that you unlock once you've beaten it on normal mode, which, no small feat in itself.
Some enemies can be frustrating to deal with, especially when you're trying to go quickly back through rooms as part of your backtracking, yet the enemies always seem to fucking respawn to fuck you all over again. I particularly hate these shrieking bat fuckers.
Twat! Now you're dead!
Bosses in the game, however, are incredible, and in true Nintendo fashion, are well designed around what abilities are available to you. They often consist of a puzzle that requires a recently acquired power-up, for example, or adapting to a pattern under certain conditions. The rest is up to you and how hard you can blast the thing, which is naturally dependent on how many missiles and health expansions you've collected, giving you even more reason to explore as you go. As you beat more bosses, sometimes harder enemies and mini-bosses will spawn in the larger rooms, which again can be frustrating to deal with when you're trying to backtrack, but it at least keeps things a bit fresher as you do so. The game's way of keeping you on edge. I mean, if you've played the game, I really don't have to sing any more of these praises, you know how good this game is, but the sound in the game is astonishingly good and does an amazing job of revamping the original Metroid tracks that have become staples of the series, with levels like the Talon Overworld making great use of that original Metroid motif. Also the Space Pirate theme, elevated to a whole new level of shit your fucking pants. And even the little tune that plays when you collect an item. The level of detail and fan service, even down to these little moments of soundtrack, only furthers my argument that this is one of the most remarkable 3D interpretations of an original series. In summary, what a beautifully crafted game. This one might have to join GoldenEye on that heavenly throne as one of my favourite games of all time. I mean, I could say the same about Super Metroid, which is also up there naturally. Something about Prime when it first released. I'd never been so giddy to play it. and it ended up being a life-changing experience. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Metroid Prime was followed up with 2 sequels across the GameCube and Wii, and re-released as a trilogy later. A Nintendo Switch release of that same trilogy should be just around the corner now, as well as the long-anticipated 4th game in the series, meaning this wonderful series is going to continue to reach a wider audience and continue to influence our generation as well as generations to come.
God damn, this one's got me all hot and bothered, and Samus hasn't even got her suit off yet. Well, that's Metroid Prime for the Nintendo GameCube. In my opinion, one of the greatest games ever made, and certainly one of the most immersive FPS games ever made. So there's no doubt in my mind when I say this, it gets a retrograde of A+ for being an awesome act of art with an abundance of amazing activities to admire.
Glad you're getting settled in, douche, because you aren't going anywhere.
Well, things could be worse, I suppose. I just wish I had my body back, because then I could actually play some of these amazing games. Why is it so hot in here? I'm sorry, I've just got to take this thing off.
No, douche, wait, no!
I'm back. And all I had to do was take off the shirt. Well, just goes to show I think a lot of this could have been avoided if I had better fashion sense. Anyway, so it's great to be back in my body, back in the den. And looks like... Yeah, scream, asshole. I'm free of that book. For good. So, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been the Retronomicon. My name is Matt, and until next time...
I'll be back.